This is the Horse Radio Network. This is episode 24 of the Equestrian Legends radio show on the Horse Radio Network, presented by Pessoa. I am Glenn the Geek, and our guest this week is United States driver Mickie Bowen. But first, a word from Pessoa. The name Pessoa is legendary in equestrian circles. During his phenomenally successful career as a rider, Nelson Pessoa set his sights on creating the ultimate in saddle design. Not satisfied with the perfection of balance, aesthetics, and craftsmanship, Nelson's goal was to provide riders of every level the opportunity to train and compete in a true competition-level saddle, a saddle that would be an aid to their balance and riding style while offering a comfortable fit for most any horse. Most importantly, Nelson felt that the saddle was a tool that the riders should not miss out on because of price. With these goals, the modern-day Pessoa was born and has come to encompass saddles, strap goods, horse boots, and blankets. Riders and their horses come in all shapes and sizes. Pessoa realizes this, and they are proud to introduce the new AO AMS, a saddle for everybody and every horse. Made of the finest grained English leather, the saddle features an exchange adjustable tree system, 3 AMS synthetic wool panel options, and 4 flap options. For the horse, go beyond an adjustable tree by providing the right panel depth and shape. The new Pessoa AO AMS features synthetic wool flocked panels specifically designed for particular horse conformations. All panel types are able to be further adjusted by a saddle fitter. To learn more about the Pessoa AO AMS and all of the other fine products at Pessoa, ask your local retailer or visit them online at PessoaUSA.com. That's PessoaUSA.com. Mickie Bowen was born in 1936 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her dad served in the cavalry and brought that love of horses to the family, and Mickie began her love of ponies at a young age. That love of ponies stuck with her as she progressed through life, and she began driving and breeding Welsh ponies and has driven a single, pair, tandem, and four-in-hand of Welsh ponies. Mickie was a founding member of the American Driving Society and served on its board of directors for the first 20 years. She was also influential in the beginning of the Brandywine Valley Driving Club, and she is very proud to have been executive director and chef de keep of the United States Driving for the Disabled for 20 years. Mickie is a large R judge for all driving disciplines for the ADS in both pleasure shows and combined driving, and the only international large R judge for driving for the disabled in the United States. Besides judging and competing at national competitions, Mickie has judged in Europe and served on the ground jury of the first and second World Disabled Championships, and in Canada at the Canadian Classic and Royal Winter Fair. For pleasure, Mickie drives a four-in-hand of Welsh Haflinger cross ponies. Mickie was married and has 3 children, John, Bonnie, and Anne, and several grandchildren. Her stature is less than 5 feet, but that has not stopped her in anything she has attempted. Here now is Mickie Bowen. Well, hi, Mickie, and welcome to the Equestrian Legends Show. I'm so excited to have you as the first driver as part of the Equestrian Legends series. I'm
flattered and almost intimidated.
Don't be intimidated. Although you are in good company. I know you went back and listened to some of the episodes, and there have been some fascinating people. And you're one of them. When I did my research on who to ask as the first driver here in the United States to be part, your name kept coming up over and over again. So I so appreciate you taking the time out to do this. Now, tell us where you live now. Where are you at right now?
I live in Unionville, Pennsylvania, and I have been here for the last 25 years, probably.
So you're in the heart of horse country there in Pennsylvania.
Yes. And prior to that, I lived in Springfield, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which is just east of here. And that's where I raised my children, in Springfield, Pennsylvania. And I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the city of Philadelphia.
Oh, right in the city?
Right in the city. Oh, yes. We were city kids. And we kept our pony, when we had it, when I was younger, at a livery stable in Cobbs Creek Parkway, and paid $3 a week board.
Wow. Let's go back to those times. Let's start there. Tell me a little bit about your parents and your family when you were, growing up, when you were real young.
Well, when I was very young, we lived in Southwest Philadelphia, which is near the Cobbs Creek Parkway, and it was very much like the suburbs would be today. It was not center city Philadelphia with the skyscrapers. But we could get on a trolley car at the corner of our street and in a half hour be in the center city Philadelphia with the skyscrapers. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, as all mothers were in those days. My father, during the war, my father worked at Hog Island near the airport in Philadelphia, loading ammunition on ammunition ships. And
World War II?
Yeah, World War II. And prior to, between 29 and 27 and 36, he had been in the Army and was a cavalryman. And that's where the horse connection came. My father was a cavalryman.
So he brought that love of horses to the family then?
Yes, not to my mother, just to my brothers and me.
So when you were young, you were growing up, was the pony living in the yard, or you said it was at a livery? It was away from
It was at a livery It was at a livery stable about 5 city blocks away. We had to walk down through the park to get there.
And what kind of pony was it?
It was just a grade pony, a mare, and her name was Katie. She was originally bought for my brother. She was my brother's pony, and when my brother decided that he wanted to get a motorbike, he sold pony rides to pay for his motorbike. And then, he had faster transportation, so I sort of fell into the pony by default.
He wasn't going to take care of it. You had to?
I didn't have to. My mother would have been very happy if the pony had just been sent packing immediately, but, sometimes those things take time, and I just lucked out. I had access to the pony, and I really enjoyed it. I really loved it, but did nothing formal, did nothing, never had any instruction except from my father, and my father's attempt at teaching was, well, if it's too hard, don't do it. It shouldn't be hard. And, but I did learn a lot from my dad, just from listening and watching. If you could watch my father had wonderful hands, and if you could just watch my father, you could learn so much.
Now, this was a livery near a city, obviously. Was there a lot of other kids your age? So was it fun to go over and just hang out with the other kids and play horsey?
No, not really. Most of the kids there were boys. Girls didn't do a lot of the things that girls are free to do today. And there was nothing organized at the barn. There were no lessons, nothing like that. And you just went over and you got your pony ready and you rode. There was no ring to ride in. You had to go out into Cobbs Creek Parkway to get to the bridle path to ride. And so there was nothing formal. And I think the only thing I really learned was how to survive, how not to fall off, how not to let her run me under a tree.
Which is what most kids learn when they have that pony.
Exactly. But they were all very valuable lessons that I used much later on.
Now, were you a studious child? Did you like school?
I did like school. I loved school. I had my introduction to music was through school, basically. And I'm not an accomplished musician, but I do love classical music and learned that at school. I enjoyed all of my friends at school, and I did love school.
Now, did you end up going to college after high school?
I did not, and because of my age, I was born in 1936, so do the math. It was not uncommon where I lived and where I came from in that day and age for girls not to go to school. You didn't even expect. Most of us didn't even expect it.
Right. It was more the exception than the rule at that point.
It was much more the exception than the rule. Actually, after the second, none of when that attitude began to change was after the Second World War. And men came home, and the men who never had access to college had access to college through the GI Bill. And so there was a lot more people getting college educations then, and jobs became more competitive, and so that you had to go to college, that kind of thing. But women were not really encouraged to go to college until after Sputnik went up. When Sputnik went up, this country was terrified that the Russians got into space before us. Mm-hmm. And they took a very serious look at our educational system and didn't necessarily like what they saw. And that was when everyone was encouraged to go to college, and they saw the need for programs to help finance people getting to college and that sort of thing. That was when the real surge of education for women came, because I guess they thought that it doesn't matter whether the brain is male or female. If they have a scientific bent, we need them.
Right,
you know?
Right. Now, you grew up, you were born in 36, was at the end of the Depression, well, sort of heading toward the end of the Depression, and, right before World War II. Do you have any memories of World War II? You were pretty young then.
I do. Well, I was 9 when the war was over, so I remember VE Day and I remember VJ Day. I remember when President Roosevelt died, there was a railroad behind our house, and I remember us going up on that viaduct and standing there. All of the neighbors, everyone went up there and watched the train go by that was carrying FDR's body from Washington to New York. And everyone cried. It was a terrible tragedy. And as far as the beginning of the war is concerned, I remember my mother's family, her brothers and sisters, and my mother and my brother and I, all sitting in my grandmother's living room listening to FDR's address. And I remember it especially because everyone was crying. All of the people around me who were the people who took care of me were crying.
Right.
And I remember that. I have that mental image in my mind as clear as if it were yesterday.
How much of that experience that your parents had growing up through the Depression and then through World War II, how much of that experience do you think affected the way you lived your life later?
Oh, my family was profoundly affected by the Depression. My mother died at 99 3 years ago, and until the day she died, the way she spent her money and the way she looked at things was strongly affected by the Depression. For instance, my father, I think the fact that I'm such a dreamer is because my father was a dreamer, but my father, because of his experience during the Depression, thought that the things that he dreamed were just pipe dreams. When I had dreams, I thought, but then again, I got married and my husband and I went through that period when if you worked hard, you could do well, and life started to change. And so my dreams were somewhat attainable. And when my children dreamed, they could be goals.
Right. That was the difference, I think, the generational difference there.
That was the generational difference that I saw in just the 3 generations that I've experienced.
Right. Well, let's go through childhood now. You grew up riding the pony, and did driving come into play at that point, or was that much later in life?
No, driving did come into play. My father built a 2-wheel cart. I don't know, did I mention to you that the pony she was a difficult pony. And so my father built a cart on an automobile axle, and his comment was, "She'll never turn this over."
I could just picture this, too, by the way, Mickie.
And so here we had these, this 2-wheel automobile axle that he built. Yeah, and he built a body on it that was very, very much like a governor's cart, except that it had wooden slatted sides. My father was a carpenter; it was not crude, and it was very much, bench seats like a governor's cart. Reminds you a lot of the back of a wagonette, and. That was our cart. My brother was more of a driver than I was, because by the time I started to do very much with the pony, putting 2 would have been, I wouldn't have had enough help. And, it was easier to put a saddle and bridle on and go.
Right.
But I did have that experience. And even at that, even though my father dubbed this carriage as being not able to be turned over, we had our moments. My oldest brother was driving one time in a big field, and I was sitting in the back with my youngest brother, who was only a couple of years old at the time. And the pony took off, and my oldest brother screamed, "Get the baby out of here." Well, how was I going to do that? So I rolled him in my coat, and I just leaned out over the back and rolled off. And my oldest brother, Bob, stopped the pony and came back to pick me up. And he said, "Don't you dare tell Mother about this. I'll kill you."
Yeah, that's kind of... Now when you think back on it, you probably cringe.
Well, at one point, after I had horses and my children had ponies, I remember having a conversation with my father and saying, "Daddy, I know you were trying to get rid of us. I've got it now." And we laughed about it, but that pony was a handful.
Was there another horse in your life as you were going through high school and then...
No, because during my teenage years, once we didn't have the pony anymore, and I was into my teenage years, I only went to the livery stable and rented a horse for $1.50 an hour. And that would be sporadic Saturdays during the nice months. And then between 55 and 61 was when I married and had my children. So I didn't really get back to doing anything organized until 63, 64, around then, after my children were born.
So horses were out of your life for that period of time, the time from when
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I would still go to the Devon Horse Show. I would still see the coaching classes and dream. But I wasn't doing anything organized at all. Until I finally started to ride, and oh my goodness, when I started to fox hunt, I loved it, and I was like a sponge. I loved every minute of it.
And you had 3 children during that period of time, right? You had John, your son, and then you had 2 daughters, Bonnie and Ann.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how old were they when you got back on that horse again?
John was probably about 8. I remember by the time Anne went to kindergarten, they were 5, 8, and 10. And by that time, I had already purchased my first Welsh pony and was starting to breed a good mare here and there and owned a stallion. And I had also started driving a pony, Lissitor Statesman, who belonged to a man named Guy Clardy. And it was from Guy Clardy, really, that I learned the most about harnessing and driving in the beginning, driving singles. And Statesman was a very typey Welsh pony. One of those animals that is just charismatic, that everybody notices. And I had quite a few wins driving him. Guy also had a very nice turnout. And I learned about turnout from Guy. I learned how to look at a carriage and vision how it would show. And I was able to stand back and see that turnout as it would look to other people.
Why Welsh ponies? Why was that the pony of choice at that point?
Well, I'm not a Hackney pony person. When they go up and down, it unnerves me. They're beautiful and they're showy, and I respect what the Hackneys can do. And also you have to remember that I was running a barn and I had 3 children. I had to have what I felt was a quieter pony. And when you look at them, just simply their appearance, they're very balanced. They have pretty faces, nice tiny little muzzles, and those cute little ears. And also, Anne, my youngest child, was my least horsey child. And I thought that if I bought her a pony, she would, maybe I could get her interested. So I went to Mrs. Jean DuPont's sale field, and at that time you could go to the sale field and buy anything for $400. And I bought a 4-year-old gelding and brought him home, and he was, in the beginning, wild as a March hare. And but we finally did, we did get him broken to ride, and Anne was riding him one day and fell off. And I remember sitting in the waiting room at the emergency room, and Anne screaming at me, "You're the meanest mommy in the world. You made me ride that pony." And I thought, oh, yeah. And then I sent the pony away to be trained to drive, and that's how I started to drive. I had to do something with the pony.
And then you got into breeding. Was that something that just happened, or a conscious decision you actually wanted to breed?
I did, because I just thought by that time that Welsh ponies were the neatest thing since bubble gum. And so I wanted to see if I could breed a few ponies. My thought was that if you could breed a few quiet Welsh ponies that were really good for children as starter ponies, that would be a great thing. But my husband said to me after I guess about 3 years, when I still had all the ponies that I ever bred, because they were too cute to let go, "Mickie, please don't try to make money. I can't afford it."
I love that quote, by the way. You've told me that before, and I love that quote. Yeah. Every horse husband should learn that at the very beginning.
Yeah. And he was a very witty man, and some
and he
of the
proved
things
you right,
he said,
I believe. Or he proved himself right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
and that was pretty much how I got into the Welsh ponies. And then, I drove a single for quite a while, and I had 3 very nice single ponies. Then you start thinking about a pair. And it took me a while to get a pony to match Penny, but I finally did. And then I started to think about a 4-in-hand, but at that time a 4-in-hand was still, it hadn't even gone from the pipe dream to the dream yet. It was still a pipe dream.
Now, were you taking lessons from anybody at that point, or were you self-taught?
At this point, I was still pretty much self-taught, but I was still gleaning everything I could from Guy Clardy, who was very, very good with ponies, and has had for a long time, and still has a good breeding program. He breeds the Clarwood Welsh ponies, and they're a very well respected line in the Welsh pony world.
And how big was, now this is back in the early to middle to late 60s, correct, that we're talking about at this point?
Yes. Well, now we might be up to like the 70s.
And how prevalent were driving competitions at that point in the United States of any kind?
That's very interesting. There were 4 major shows. So I could fox hunt all season and get my horses ready for the hunter trials, do the hunter trials, and then take the ponies out of the field and start getting ready for the shows. The first one was Devon, which is the end of May. And then we had one in Stony Brook, Long Island, and one in Fairfield, Connecticut. And then in the fall, we had a drive to the Pennsylvania Hunt Cup, which in this area everyone loves to do.
Mm-hmm. That
was the season. And then, of course, the Hunt Cup was in November, so now I'm fox hunting again. And, for the first several years, that was kind of how it went.
We kind of missed that little part, too, about you fox hunting, because that was a big part of your life, fox hunting.
Oh, it was. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Who'd you hunt with?
Mm-hmm. I hunted with the Radnor Hounds. I was a member at Radnor. And my children hunted with me. My 2 oldest children hunted with me.
And the Radnor hunt, I'm familiar with that, having been to Radnor before. It's beautiful country. Of course, it wasn't as built up back then as it is now.
No, but I was just driving through there the other day, and Radnor has developed in a very nice way. It still gives a very country feeling. And a lot of the big estates, 2 of the big estates that I know of, were bought by M. Night Shyamalan. Mm-hmm. And had been kept open.
And Radnor, you guys used to travel, used to visit other hunts and things too at that point in time, if I remember.
Yes, we would have joint meets with Pickering, and we would go to Fair Hill once a year, and it was really wonderful.
And were you riding the Welsh ponies? What were you riding at that point?
Oh no, I didn't hunt my ponies. I hunted. The best horses that I could afford, and the later ones were better than the earlier ones. And I learned from all of the horses that I had. I learned good lessons from the first one. The first horse that I had was a great jumper, but he was a big raw-boned horse. Wouldn't even be considered a lady's horse by any standards even then. But he was available to me and safe, and I pretty much learned to hunt on him. A big bay horse named Irish. And each horse I got, I sort of upgraded. And sometimes I had as many as 3 because I hunted 3 days a week. I absolutely loved it.
You certainly did, and my wife is a hunter too, so I know exactly what you're talking about, that passion to go out there and run fast, jump high.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was what it was. It was exciting. It was really, really great.
Now, at some point here then, and if we're up to the early 70s and you're driving and you're hunting and you're doing all of that, you were a part of the creation and the founding of the American Driving Society. Tell us about the beginning of that. How did that come to be and why?
I was a founding member of the American Driving Society, but I did not have anything to do with the organizing of it. That basically, Philip Hoffman was the first president. And one of the big movers and shakers at that time was the first secretary, and his name was Robert Heath. And it was he and Jack Weir, who was also based in that New York, New Jersey area, and Craig Kellogg's father, Charlie Kellogg. They were the people who put their heads together and decided we needed an organization. We needed to have one set of rules that everybody could go by, so that at that point, anyone who was knowledgeable about driving at all could be asked to judge a show. But we weren't being judged by any one set of standards. I think that Phil Hoffman and Jack Weir and Charlie Kellogg, they just all realized that we needed an organization to draw us all together to make it so that we had a common front to present when we wanted to have shows, ad driving, and that sort of thing.
And driving at that point in America was starting to pick up, wasn't it? There were more drivers coming back into play at that point.
Yes, there were many more drivers coming back into that play, particularly in this area. And it was that particular meeting to organize the ADS was held at the Fairfield Hunt Club in conjunction with the pleasure driving show that was put on every year at Fairfield. And one of the things that I remember particularly about it was that Mary O'Rourke, Jamie's mother, had the concern that we would start a system that we would all be point chasing. And she said, I would never want to see that happen to driving, and because of that is why driving still does not have cash prizes.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. Mary and Jamie. Jamie was still a kid, but he's been involved since he was driving tandem when he was 9 years old. Driving tandem well when he was 9 years old.
Now, I know sometimes in the beginning of associations like this and organizations like this, it's a bumpy road the first couple of years because you anytime you get more than two people together, you have differing opinions. Was it that way with the American Driving Society, or was it more? Was it a smoother? What do you remember it being smoother than that?
I remember it being fairly smooth. I really do, because it was and is a comparatively small group. I mean, we don't have the kinds of numbers that the USEF has.
Right.
And I was on the board of directors for the first, oh my goodness, almost 15 years. I was a member of the board of directors. And our meetings would be twice a year, and they were always, they always went along smoothly, and we accomplished a great deal.
And is that the point, too, when you started getting more into competitions and becoming more competitive yourself?
Yes, I was never really competitive in combined driving, but I did do, I wrote some things down in preparation for this because I thought, I don't want a lot of dead air time. Well, and I showed at Devon and did well with my single ponies at Devon. I did well with pairs at Devon in the pony division. But I never really got into combined driving too much. First of all, in the beginning of combined driving, the only show, the first one was in 1970. The first Myopia was the first big organized combined driving event in the United States. And that was in 1976, the bicentennial year. And I went to that and I competed. And that was the first time I had ever competed in a full-fledged 3-day format. And I did that with a single pony. I think I was fourth. I'm not sure. Later on, about 3 or 4 years later, I competed with a 4-in-hand of ponies. But other than that, I really did not compete a lot in combined driving. I did become involved in a lot of other ways and subsequently became a judge. And so I was involved in other ways, but I was not really a high performance driver.
Right. Where did you did eventually get into 4-in-hand? Who helped you with that?
Oh, what a story that was. I had a pair of Welsh ponies, Penny and Piper. And Penny was my original $400 sale field pony. And I got Piper somewhere along the way, mainly because he matched. And they did well. I did well with those ponies. And I was hunting because, 2 and 2 makes 4. So I was always hunting for other ponies. But it's very hard to match even gray Welsh ponies. It's very hard to get them to go alike and, disposition and all of that. I went to the Martin sale, and during one of the breaks, I went out to a picnic table and sat under the tree. And Sybil Ducart was there, and I had known Mrs. Ducart because she also bred Welsh ponies, and she also had a pair of Welsh ponies. But other than that, she had judged me a few times, but other than that, I didn't know Mrs. Ducart very well. And she said to me, "How is your pair going?" And I said to her, "They're going very well, Mrs. Ducart." And I said, I really enjoy them. I said, I looked for a few other ponies. I'd love to get a 4 together. I said, but, I just am not getting it off the ground. And she said, well, my pair is also going very well. And why don't you come down and we'll put our pairs together. And I thought, this is wonderful. So what we did, we talked about it later, and we got Tom Ryder to come to Pennsylvania. We spoke to a man who had an indoor arena. It was in the wintertime. We spoke to a man in the Radnor area, Saunders Dixon, who had an indoor arena, and he said, oh, yes, by all means, bring the ponies. Come, and this is when the ring will be empty. You're welcome to it any time. Tom Ryder came up and put our pairs of ponies together. And we continued doing it once a week and having Tom Ryder for maybe 2 months. And then we were on our own. Both of us were driving the 4 in hand. And I would trailer my 2 ponies down to Sybil's farm, go down in the afternoon, stay overnight, and drive the next morning and come home. And we did that once a week. We did that for 4 years, perhaps.
Had she ever done a 4? Had Mrs. Ducart ever done a 4?
No.
So you were both learning together.
We pretty much learned it together, yeah. And those ponies were quick as bunnies. I mean, we really learned on those ponies. And we both loved it. We both just loved it. It was just, for me, driving 4 in him was just a wonderful dream that, might have been a pipe dream. But for that chance meeting at that picnic table under the tree. And more important than that, Sybil became a very important person in my life. Sybil was my mentor. And she was 18 years my senior. She came out the year that I was born. She came out in New York the year that I was born. And she just had, well, first of all, she was an extraordinary person. And she had great vision and great energy and access. She had all of those friends in New York. And she never hesitated. When she wanted to do something, she just said, let's do it. And I'd say, oh, but. And she'd say, well, why can't we do it? Come on, let's do it. And the two of us really did a great deal together that I would never have done otherwise.
She was a fascinating person, and she actually wrote a couple of kids' books, too, if I remember right.
She did, yes, yeah. She did. Well, I think more important than that, she was the founder of Driving for the Disabled in Maryland, which later became United States Driving for the Disabled.
I think we lost her, 2005, was it? It was 2005.
I believe so.
I think she was in her 80s.
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 2005.
And that leads you made a beautiful transition there, because that was the next thing on my list to talk to you about, was something that's very dear to your heart and you've been involved with for many, many years, and that is the United States Driving for the Disabled. Tell us about that.
Well, Sybil was the founder and president of Driving for the Disabled, and I worked for Driving for the Disabled. I was the secretary, and Sybil and I did everything together, and it didn't matter much what our title was. We were the ones who had to, whatever our
but there's two people part of it. You do everything.
Yeah, exactly. And we started out driving at the McDonough School, and the Multiple Sclerosis Society would van people to us, and we would give them driving instructions in special carriages that accepted wheelchairs. And we worked very hard at it, and we had a very good volunteer base that stuck with us like glue. Well, Dana Bright, who was also one of, our most successful judges right now, she was one of our volunteers that was with us for years. And we just worked quietly and chipped away at things. And then it was in 1993 that drivers were invited to go to a world championship. And Driving for the Disabled was pretty much responsible for organizing the disabled drivers in the United States and creating a selection process and helping those people to get there.
Now, I know that you've made many friends along the way in Driving for the Disabled. What has that meant to you, being part of that over all these years?
Well, it was the first time that I made friends internationally, really. Well, not just friends and acquaintances, but I worked with people internationally. It was the first time I interacted on a professional basis internationally, and you can imagine the personal growth that came from that.
Right.
And it was, I'll tell you, it makes you stop complaining because you have an acre of pain. I mean, you see the courage that it takes those people just to get up in the morning, and the process that they have to go through just to be ready to walk out the door and do what needs to be done in a day in your life. And, a headache or an acre of pain becomes insignificant to you.
Now, are you still involved with the organization?
No, I'm not. No, when I retired, was just about the time that I got this last four-in-hand of ponies that I have, which is the best team of ponies I've ever had. And I wanted to retire and drive.
And I know that before we go on here, before we go into more recent times, I know that Mrs. Dukehart, one of the things that I remember, and I read this a long time ago, is that she was one of the teams that got to drive in the inauguration parade for President Reagan. I think it was his second term. Did you know her then? Were you part of that?
I was there.
Were you?
I went down there. Oh my goodness, what a day that was! Because it was his first term, I believe, because it was when they released the hostages at the end of Jimmy Carter's term.
That would have been his first term then. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was his first term. Yes, and what happened was we were stabled at a facility outside of the city, and everybody vanned in to Washington the morning of the inauguration. And our van was in the area of the Washington Monument. And what happened was when the word came that the hostages were released, they cut the city off. You couldn't get in or get out. Security cut the city off.
Huh.
and you could not get in or get out of Washington, D.C. And we were just kind of stranded there. And my daughter was there. My daughter Bonnie was there. And, of course, Mrs. Dukart drove the ponies in the parade. And I had to walk 2 miles to the pickup truck to try to get the pickup truck and our supplies in it. And I didn't know Washington. I mean, it was really something. And then we couldn't get out of the city after the parade, so we all had our horses on the lawn of the Washington Monument, and the fireworks started.
Oh, geez.
And Mrs. Dukart and I handed each of our party a pony and said, "Don't let go under any circumstances." We got these 4 great ponies on the lawn, and we're holding on for dear life. And the fireworks went up, and the ponies casually looked up and put their heads down and ate the grass.
Yeah, they didn't care. They had just been through a parade and with a million people lining the parade route.
Right.
Now, tell me, do you remember the first time that you drove a coach and what a feeling that was? Because that had to be a dream at some point, too. And we should explain for the non-drivers out there, the coach, how do we explain the coach? It's the very large vehicle that you see sometimes in parades and things where the drivers sit up way up top.
Well, I think the best description of it for people who don't have any idea is it's what you see on a Christmas card.
There you go.
With 4 horses.
There you go. That's
I mean, for those who are totally uninitiated, that's the most relatable thing. The first time I ever drove a coach was in the warm-up ring at Devon. I went over to Devon to see the classes, and Ann Leck was there with her hackneys. And she said, "Oh, Mickie, come aboard." And so I got up, and we were sitting there chatting, and she said to me, "Would you like to drive my horses?" And I was dumbstruck and flattered and eager. And so I took the reins, and I drove probably for 10 minutes. And it was the first time I'd ever driven a coach.
And you've done it a lot since then, because I've seen many, many pictures of you driving coaches.
Well, the photograph that you see of me driving the coach, that is the old times, and it belongs to Mr. Harry Tootsie. And in 2004, when they had the...
we should mention, for the uninitiated, too, into driving, is that all the coaches have names.
The road coaches have names.
Yep.
The park drags do not. Park drags were private vehicles, and they're painted in, they're a sort of lighter built and finer, and they're painted in more subdued colors. The ones that you see with writing on them that says Bath to London or something like that, they were road coaches, and they were commercial vehicles. And they have names. They all have names.
Right.
And Sybil's coach was the Hummingbird. It was a private road coach that she named the Hummingbird because it was small and traveled long distances. So she named it the Hummingbird. And the coach that I drove in 2004 and 2005 is the old times, and it belonged to Harry Tootsie. It does still belong to Harry Tootsie.
Well,
and we drove in Middleburg, my horses and his coach, for the big sporting library drive that they had in 2004. And there were 31, 32 coaches, park drags, and 4-in-hands there.
And we'll post pictures of that coach on our website at equestrianlegends.com on this episode. And there's some things I want to get to too before we run out of time here, and we have so much more that we could talk about. You've been a judge for so many years. There's 1,000 entries on the internet of you judging various shows, and you also been a judge for disabled driving, as well as USEF and ADS. So, there's been so much of that as part of your life as well. You did some judging, too, as I understand it, overseas in Europe and for the World Disabled Driving Championships back in the first and second of those, the very beginning of those.
Yes, one was in Wolfsburg, Germany, and the other was in the Netherlands, I believe. Mm-hmm.
And then the Royal Winter Fair, which is something I've never attended but always wanted to.
Yes, the Royal Winter Fair, which, over my judging career, first of all, the judging, what a learning experience. That does sound backwards, I know, but oh my goodness, what a learning experience judging has been, and I love it. I really enjoy judging. But when I was called to do the Royal Winter Fair, I thought, oh my goodness. And I was like you see pictures of tourists looking at the Empire State Building in New
Yes.
York.
That was you.
That's it. Even more so than going to Europe, And it was just wonderful. And I did not judge coaching there. I judged the Welsh ponies.
Oh, okay.
Both times that I went up. And because I'm so local at Devon, I was only called to judge the ponies in the marathon once at Devon. But I kept my Devon badge. And I kept my badge from the Royal. And other than that, I've never really, those things, those identification badges come and go, and you have them in the drawer, and then you clean it out, and they go. But the two from the Royal and the one from Devon are in my jewelry box.
You would have 1,000 of them lining your wall if you had kept them all.
Yeah, well, it just never occurred to me. But, being put on the spot to say, what have you done in your life? And thinking, yeah, well, what really have I done? You get up every morning, you live your life, you do what you think you can. You do have milestones, but, they come and they go. And, maybe I should have really saved more of my badges.
Well, I do. Speaking of what have you done in your life and some of the other things, before we end here today, I have a series of questions I like to ask at the end of every one of these interviews. And so I'm going to ask you those questions. The first one is, do you have any passions outside of horses?
I love classical music. And I read a good bit. I particularly enjoy the history in England between the time of Eleanor of Aquitaine and through Elizabeth I. Not very many people know it, but my family, we're from Philadelphia, of course, as I've said, and our family has been involved with the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia for a long time. My grandfather, in fact, marched in the first 52 consecutive parades.
Wow! Now, were they part of a costume division or a band, or?
My grandfather played the trombone, and he was in a band. My father paraded in the comic division. Both of my brothers, were active in the fancy division, the fancy costume division, and that's where I marched. My youngest brother, who is a musician, and who has designed and made costumes for the string bands, has become very involved in the string bands. So throughout the family, we have a broad experience.
As I mentioned, though, in the intro, Mickie is about maybe pushing 5 feet. So this is one way you could feel tall. You just made your costume bigger.
I hadn't really thought of that. I always related being tall to platform shoes.
That's amazing. That's so. We grew up watching the Mummers Parade. I grew up in Pennsylvania, not too far from Philadelphia, so we grew up watching that. And I probably saw you strut your stuff right down.
Oh, and we can too. For the last several years, my daughters and my daughter Bonnie and I competed in a category that is called Trio Pantomime Clown. You have 3 clown costumes that match, and 3 people march together, and you don't have to have a big headpiece. It doesn't have to be cumbersome or heavy. And my daughter Bonnie is a very talented seamstress too, and she makes the costumes, and they're breathtaking. I mean, we've come away with first prizes many times. My daughter's very, very clever at that. The last costume she made were bees, and it was when our theme was "We Be Mummin'."
And for those that don't know, the Mummers Day Parade's held every year on January the 1st in Philadelphia, and it is always horrendous weather. It's either snowing, raining, freezing cold, or hot. It always seems to work that way. But it's a one-of-a-kind, truly unique parade that's not held. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the world.
It's Philadelphia folk art.
Yep. It is definitely that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you may have already answered the next question then. Tell us something about you that most of the people in the driving community may not know about you.
That would be the Mummers.
Yeah.
That would be the Mummers.
I figured I didn't know that either. Are you into modern technology? Do you have the latest smartphone, iPads, etc.?
No, I have a cell phone that I find challenging from time to time. And I can go online and get my email and bring up my Facebook. And I can do, in fact, I just learned to scan the other day. Well, I was shown how to do it, probably have not retained it because I have to do something repetitively to really retain it. But I don't think you could really call me computer literate. Although I do communicate by email for the last 5 or 6 years. Most of my judging contracts have come in via email, and most of my invitations to judge come through email now. So I've had to adapt somewhat.
If you had it to do all over again, knowing what you know now, what is the biggest thing that you would change about how you lived your life?
I wouldn't change it.
There you go.
I wouldn't change it. I am most thankful that life to me is kind of an adventure. And some days adventures are good, some are bad, some are tolerable, some are less tolerable. But I've always been hopeful about life, and I've always enjoyed life, and I wouldn't change that. And I am thrilled that my youngest daughter has that same attitude toward life, and I don't know if she realizes it or not, but I watch her sometime, and I think, thank goodness she's like that. And Sybil was like that. Every day is an adventure, and I have enough faith that I'll take today's and deal with it.
And I know one of the things that's so satisfying for you now, you've done so much in your life, but one of the things that's so satisfying for you now is the fact that your son John is now driving with you, so you get to do that with him at this point.
Yes, and my granddaughter rides, and she's into dressage, and she has a lovely horse. And, that I get a great deal of satisfaction.
And she's a third or fourth level horse, doesn't she, over at Jessica Ranshausen?
Yeah. Well, the horse is now in Atlanta with her. She's graduated college, and she's working in Atlanta and has the horse with her. Yes, it is a third level horse at this point, I think. And, that's very gratifying to watch. To see your children. I rode aside, and that was so important at the time, and I didn't realize it, because when you ride aside, you ride with your body more than with your arms, and the body weight is so important, and that's also very important in driving. A lot of people don't realize it, but the way you use your body is also very important in driving. And when I look at Elizabeth and I see her riding as well as she rides, and to see that she has advanced far beyond what I could ever do. I am just so gratified by that. I think, it's great when you can see the progression, when you can see things marching on.
And marching on leads us to our last question. What is still on your bucket list? What do you hope to accomplish in the future?
It's funny, we talked about that. I have done so many things in my life that I never imagined would be possible, that I don't really have a bucket list. I would perhaps like to see my son get a pair of horses to replace my now aging ponies. I want to keep driving. One thing on my bucket list, I guess I do have something on my bucket list for this year, is I want to get my four-handed ponies going well enough by the fall. And I've asked Donna Bright if she would come out and if she would video me driving so that I have some record of me on the box seat with this particular team.
That's something you don't think about in today's technology. Drivers today who are starting, recently have everything they do videotaped. But when you started driving, that was not a common thing. It was very expensive, and it was just not done.
And the equipment was so cumbersome.
Yeah, they were huge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Mickie. We so appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for everything you've done for the driving world and to really bring the driving world into the modern era here in the United States.
Well, and I thank the driving world for making my life what it was, and for all the wonderful people I've met.